This story comes from the depths of Reddit to chill your bones. Names and places have been changed to protect the people involved. The Haunting of Tekong Island, Singapore. A gleaming island nation of glass towers and manicured gardens. A place where order is not just preferred, it is law. But even in a country that runs with the precision of a Swiss timepiece, there are corners where the watch stops, where time folds in on itself, where something old and patient waits in the dark for young men who have no choice but to come to it. This is the story of one such place, a place called Tekong. Pulau Tekong. If you look at a map of Singapore, it sits just off the northeastern coast, the largest outlying island in the country. Today, it is almost entirely given over to the Singapore Armed Forces. Barbed wire, concrete bunkers, dense tropical jungle that swallows footpaths whole. It has been closed to civilians for over 15 years, sealed off, guarded. A place where young men are sent to become soldiers. But Tekong's history did not begin with the military. Long before the government claimed it for training grounds, Tekong was home to villages, kampungs they called them, small communities of Malay and Chinese families who fished the surrounding waters and lived simply on the jungle's edge. There were schools, a mosque, homes with zinc roofs that drummed in the monsoon rain, children who played in the red earth and swam in the shallows. And then, one by one, the families were relocated. The government had plans. The island was needed for something else. The villages were demolished. The jungle grew back over the paths, the foundations, the graves. They did not move everyone. Some say the island was never fully cleared, that the bureaucracy of resettlement missed a few, that some people, for reasons no one recorded, simply stayed behind. Whether that is true or not, I cannot tell you, but I can tell you this. The soldiers who train on Tekong will all eventually hear stories, and they will all eventually wish they hadn't. Now, let me tell you about the young man whose experience sits at the center of this story. He was a recruit, barely 18, fresh out of secondary school, the way most Singaporean men are when they begin their national service. 2 years of mandatory military training. No choice, no exceptions. You turn 18, you report, and the Army owns your days and your nights. He was assigned to a training camp deep in the interior of Tekong, not the polished admin blocks near the ferry pier. No, this was a camp set well back from the coast, buried in the jungle canopy. The kind of place where the humidity sits on your chest like a hand, and the cicadas scream so loud at dusk that you can't hear the man next to you shout. The bunks were simple, long wooden barracks with rows of beds, footlockers, fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. During the day, the recruits drilled, ran, cleaned, and drilled again. At night, they collapsed onto their beds, too exhausted to think. But not too exhausted to notice. It started small, the way it always does. A recruit would place his water canteen at the foot of his bed before lights out. Standard protocol, everything in its place, and in the morning, it would be gone. Not lost, not stolen, just moved. Found inside a sealed duffel bag 3 bunks away, the zipper pulled tight. The recruit would laugh it off. Fatigue, muscle memory. He must have put it there without thinking. Then another recruit's boot socks vanished from where they were folded under his pillow and turned up inside his footlocker, beneath a stack of folded uniforms he was certain he had not disturbed. Items moving, quietly, without explanation. Nobody talked about it, not at first. In the military, you learn quickly that complaining makes you a target. If your canteen ends up in the wrong bag, You keep your mouth shut and chalk it up to long days and short sleep. Besides, the camp had a reputation. Every recruit heard the whispers from the batch before theirs. Footsteps in empty corridors, shadows that didn't match anyone standing, the feeling of being watched while you showered alone. You hear these things, and you laugh. Of course you laugh. You are 18 and invincible, and the world makes sense. Ghosts are for children and horror movies. You are a soldier. Until you are not. Now, before I continue, if stories like this keep you up at night, in the best way, take a moment to subscribe and tap that bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into the dark and unexplained. The night everything changed began like any other. Lights out at 2200 hours. The fluorescent tubes above snapped off with a mechanical clunk, and the bunk sank into a familiar darkness. Not complete darkness, never complete on Tekong, because the emergency exit signs cast a thin red glow across the ceiling, and the jungle outside pressed its own green-black shadow against the windows. Most of the recruits were already half gone, their breathing slow and heavy, the particular rhythm of young men pushed to their physical limits. But one of them, our storyteller's friend, was still awake. He lay on his side, his back to the room, the dim blue-white glow of a mobile phone screen hidden beneath his blanket. He was texting his girlfriend. Back then, the Singapore military did not allow phones with cameras in camp. Most guys had old handsets, the kind with physical buttons and tiny screens. No apps, no internet. Just text messages, letter by letter, typed out in the dark like love notes slipped under a door. He was smiling to himself, probably, the way you do when you are 18 and someone out there in the world is thinking of you. The room was quiet. The jungle hummed outside. Everything was still. And then he heard it. Footsteps in the corridor. The shuffling of feet on concrete, soft, deliberate, unhurried, the way a duty sergeant walks when he is doing his rounds, checking for phones, checking for contraband, checking for boys who are not where they should be. The young man's heart lurched. He killed the screen in an instant, shoved the phone deep under his pillow, rolled onto his side, and closed his eyes. He regulated his breathing, made his body go slack. The performance of sleep. Every conscript learns it, and learns it well. The footsteps stopped. Just stopped. Not at the door, not moving away, simply ceasing to exist mid-stride, as though the person walking had been plucked from the corridor like a note from a song. And then a voice, right behind him, at the far side of his bed, close enough that he could feel, or thought he felt, the faintest displacement of air against the back of his neck. Don't worry, you can continue to pretend sleep. The words came in a voice that did not belong to a sergeant, did not belong to a recruit, did not belong to any man on that island. It was the voice of a little girl. The young man did not move, could not move. His eyes were squeezed shut, and his hands were fists beneath the blanket, and every nerve in his body was screaming at him to run. But his legs were concrete, his spine was ice, and he lay there perfectly still as the words dissolved into silence. And the silence was worse. He was not the only one who heard it. 5 other recruits in the immediate vicinity heard the voice as clearly as he did. 5 young men lying in their beds, drifting toward sleep, who were ripped from the edge of unconsciousness by the sound of a child's voice in a place where no child could possibly be. One of them was the storyteller himself. He described it like this. He was half asleep, the kind of floating awareness where you hear things but don't process them, when the voice sliced through the dark like a blade. Not loud, not shouting, just present, clear, as though someone had leaned into the center of the room and spoken directly into the air between them. "Don't worry. You can continue to pretend sleep." He said the words didn't echo. They didn't fade. They simply were, and then they weren't. And in the gap between the two, no one in that bunk dared to breathe. They lay like that for what felt like hours, eyes open now, staring at the red glow on the ceiling, waiting for something else. A footstep, a laugh, a sign that what they had heard had a source, a body, a reason. Nothing came. Morning arrived the way it always did on Tekong, the jungle erupting with birdsong, the light pressing gray and then gold through the windows, the first bugle call splitting the air like a knife. And in the bunk, 6 young men rose from their beds and looked at one another and said nothing. Not a word. Because what do you say? What language do you use for a thing that has no language? They went about their morning routine, beds made, footlockers squared away, boots laced, and the silence between them was a living thing, a third presence in the room that none of them acknowledged. It is remarkable, isn't it, how we agree to share a horror and then agree never to speak of it, as though silence is a kind of ritual, as though if we do not give the thing words, it cannot become real. But Tekong was not finished. The following weekend, the recruits were granted home leave, 48 hours off the island. They packed their bags, caught the ferry back to the mainland, and for 2 days they lived in the world of air conditioning and phone screens and girlfriends who believed them when they said everything was fine. When they returned on Sunday evening, the bunk was exactly as they had left it, locked, sealed. The duty sergeant had cycled through his rounds and found nothing out of the ordinary. The recruits filed in, dropped their bags, and began unpacking. And then the young man, the one who had been texting his girlfriend, the one behind whom the voice had spoken, reached his bed. On his mattress, arranged neatly across the pillow, was a bundle of hair. Long hair, jet black, smooth and fine, the way hair is when it has been carefully gathered, not torn, not cut in haste, but collected, bundled, deliberately placed. Female hair. There was no question. The length alone told the story. It stretched well past his pillow, pooled onto the sheet, enough hair to belong to someone who had kept it long, for years. And beneath the pillow, there was a note. He lifted the pillow with trembling hands. Folded into a small square was a piece of paper, not camp-issued, not torn from a notebook, but clean and white and deliberately folded. He opened it. "Remember me?" He stared at the words. He stared at the hair, and the room, which a moment ago had been filled with the casual noise of young men returning from leave, went very, very quiet. Because the bunk had been locked all weekend. No one had entered. The duty sergeant had confirmed this. There were no female personnel stationed on the island, not one. The nearest civilian settlement was across the water, a ferry ride away, and the door had been padlocked from the outside since Friday evening. Someone, or something, had been in that room, had stood over his bed, had placed hair on his pillow and a note beneath it, and then left, without a trace, without a sound, without breaking a single lock. The young man folded the note back up. He swept the hair off his bed onto the floor, and he did not speak of it. None of them did. That is the silence of men who have looked into something they do not understand and decided collectively that understanding it would cost more than ignoring it. It is a kind of courage in its way, or perhaps a kind of surrender. Now, if you have made it this far, you are exactly where you belong. Take a second to subscribe and ring that bell, because the darkness we explore here only deepens from here. In the weeks and months that followed, the recruits moved on, the way soldiers do, to new camps, new phases of training. But the story of that bunk did not die. It was passed forward, recruit to recruit, batch to batch, the way stories are on Tekong. And what the narrator of this experience came to understand, slowly and reluctantly, was that his was not unique. Tekong is a place saturated with such accounts. Soldiers have reported hearing children laughing in the jungle at hours when no child should be awake. Others have described the sensation of a small hand gripping their ankle in the middle of the night, a tight, cold grip that releases only when they sit up and scream. One recruit, a young man from a different company entirely, swore he saw a figure standing at the far end of the parade ground at 3 in the morning, small, motionless, watching. He looked away for a moment, looked back, and it was gone. Another described waking at dawn to find tiny, muddy footprints leading from the door of his bunk to the foot of his bed. Small footprints, a child's footprints, in soil that matched no ground inside the camp. These stories are not rare on Tekong. They are, in fact, almost common. Ask any veteran of national service, and they will know someone, a friend, a bunkmate, a cousin, who experienced something on that island that they could not explain, something that slipped past the rigid structure of military life and lodged itself like a splinter beneath the skin. And the question that haunts, if you will forgive the word, every retelling is the same. Who is she? The little girl, the voice in the dark, the source of the hair and the note. Who is she, and what does she want with young men who come to her island to become soldiers? There are theories, of course. Tekong was once home to families, villages that were razed, graves that were relocated. Or were they? The island's soil holds memory, the jungle holds silence, and perhaps in the spaces between the two, something remains that was never properly sent on. A child who died before the move was made, a family that vanished between the paperwork, a girl who grew up on the red earth and was buried beneath it and never left. Or perhaps she is something older, something that was there before the villages, before the jungle, before the island had a name, something that attaches itself to the young and the weary and the far from home. We cannot know. That is the particular cruelty of these stories. They offer no resolution, no explanation, no comfort. Only the words, "Don't worry. You can continue to pretend sleep. Remember me?" The narrator of this story was clear about one thing. He is not asking you to believe him. He acknowledged that it could have been a prank, an elaborate, impossible, meticulous prank carried out by someone who had access to a locked building, a supply of jet-black female hair, and the uncanny ability to mimic a child's voice in total darkness. If it was a prank, he said, he applauds whoever pulled it off. Because the complexity of such a thing, the planning, the access, the precision, would have been extraordinary. He simply did not believe that was the case, and neither did the 5 other men who heard that voice in the dark. He said one more thing that has stayed with me. He said that most men who have passed through Tekong have either experienced something firsthand or know someone who has. That is not the language of a man telling a tall tale. That is the language of a community bound by an unspoken agreement. Something is on that island, and we do not speak its name. And so the recruits continue to arrive, ferry after ferry, batch after batch. Young men with buzz cuts and duffel bags who step onto the pier and look up at the green wall of jungle and feel, without knowing why, that the island is looking back. They will drill, they will run, they will sweat and bleed and learn to be soldiers. And some of them, in the dark hours after lights out, will hear something that does not belong, something small and quiet and patient, and they will pretend to sleep. This has been a Sleepy Deep Dive. Thank you for listening, and remember, the night is only empty until it isn't.